We'll break down what's wrong with America and why the left is trying to destroy us with former Congressman Louie Gohmert on this episode of United Patriots Uprising. I'm your host, Gary Benford. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Hope you'll subscribe to it, leave a rating and a review. You can find the video version at YouTube, Rumble, and Conservative Television of America. Same thing. Hope you'll subscribe, leave a review, and hit that notification button so every Tuesday when a podcast drops, you will receive it. You know, we're in dire straits right now, America. Really, really dire straits. I'm sure that everybody who is tuned into or in favor of we the people understand this. My guest wants to talk about the Marxist revolution and what it's doing to both sides of the aisle. Ready to find out? Well, let's get into it. He was an accomplished attorney, a judge, and a longtime Republican congressman from Texas. Did great things from 2005 to 2023. Now he's a senior fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and he's here to talk about something that's really, really interesting. I'm happy to bring to the show Louie Gohmert. How are you, Louie?
Gary, as far as I know, I'm fine. Just glad to be on with you.
Well, I'm glad to have you. Keep up the good fight. And you're involved now with somebody who's been on the show 3 times, David Horowitz. He's got a great center. And you wrote a piece that I think ran on front page, The Marxist Revolution in the Democratic Party 2024. And what was absolutely amazing to me about this is that Democrats are surprised that something in their party is going to eat its own. Didn't they see what happened with Mao? Didn't they see what happened with Stalin? Didn't they see what happens to anybody when Marxists take over, Marxist communists get involved, and they no longer need the useful idiots?
Well, I guess they're victims of poor education. So, that's one of the products of poor education system. When people don't learn history, they don't know. And actually, they're not the only ones who are lacking in knowledge of history. The mega wealthy that are helping fund the Marxist takeover, they're thinking that, once we have the Marxist takeover, we have the Orwellian totalitarian government, then I'll be one of those very few at the top ruling over everything. They don't know, they never learned from history, that every time there's a Marxist takeover, they don't even say thank you for funding this takeover for us. They simply take all their money and either kill them or send them to a gulag or a prison. So they haven't learned that. They're still thinking, I'm going to be in charge once the takeover occurs. And they're not. That's not historically what happens.
Yeah, and the weird thing about it is the reason Mao or whoever gets rid of them first, they realize they're useless. First off, they realize we're traitors to the country. So they're traitors to the country and they can't use them because they're not even intelligent enough to realize they're A, working against the American Constitution, and B, working with enemies of the state and everything. They can't use them. And they think we're gonna rule with you. No, we don't need people like you, right?
Well, they see them as a threat. Look at Putin. I mean, that's not even a communist country anymore. It is totalitarian. But anytime Putin sees somebody wealthy that may be a threat, he gets rid of them. Prison or death, one or the other.
Takes the money.
Yeah, but thank you very much. We'll take your money, but they don't usually say thank you for getting their money. So there's a lot to learn, and it's one of the consequences of not teaching adequate history around the country for the last 50 years. Teaching that socialism is a good thing. And I know Margaret Thatcher had said, and most people quote her, socialism works till you run out of other people's money. But I was an exchange student to the Soviet Union for a summer back in the real Soviet days. And
why? Oh my gosh.
Well, I kind of got pushed into it by the director of the student center at Texas A&M.
I was afraid you were going to say your parents pushed you into it.
Well, I was shocked that they allowed me to be one of the 8 Americans allowed in that summer on this program because I had an Army scholarship. I was on an Army scholarship. I was going to go into the Army, but it turns out there was another guy that had an Army scholarship at Princeton that was on the trip as well, one of the exchange students that summer. But out at an exchange, at a collective farm, that are supposed to be so awesome. I've worked on farms and ranches growing up in East Texas, and it was about the same parallel there in Ukraine where I was. And anyway, it's mid-morning. Well, everybody I knew working on a farm or ranch, you were out there working that time of morning because you wanted to finish before the sun got its hottest. And here were all the farmers sitting under a tree in the middle of the village. And I tried to use my best Russian, I thought, and I asked with a smile, when do you work out in the field? And really, Gary, I couldn't tell what was cultivated and what wasn't. It didn't look good. And when I asked my question, all the farmers started laughing. And I thought I may have said it wrong in Russian. And then one of the big farmers said, the older guy said, I make the same number of rubles if I'm out there in the sun or I'm here in the shade. So I stay in the shade. Now, I think that, Gary, is a better example of why socialism doesn't work. If you're going to pay everybody the same, whether they work or don't work, it's going to collapse at some point.
Well, yes. And I just don't understand. Like, we know part of the takeover, like W. Cleon Skousen warned us in the late 50s about they'll take over the educational system, they'll take over the schools, they'll take over Hollywood, they'll take over the unions, they'll want to promote homosexuality, they want to promote easy divorce. We understand all the planks to try and turn a nation communism. But the one thing that is amazing me and you, please, before we get into what is going on in the country now, explain to me why we're going down this rabbit hole when we see what's happening in Cuba, we saw what happened in Germany, we saw what happened in Russia, and lately we see what happened to that once great country, Venezuela. I've been to Caracas 4 times back in the 80s. You have people that were eating their pets now. Why haven't we caught on that socialism doesn't work?
Well, I would say it's a one-word answer: arrogance. These people think they're so arrogant. They think that, well, none of those people did it right. When we take over, we'll do it right, and therefore it will work. But one of the things David Horowitz addresses in his brand new book that, when he says, when I was a communist, we had to believe that even though we were the problem, people's fallibility, their greed, their ambition, their things that get in the way, that with all those problems, we could fix everything if you just gave us more power. That's what the communists were thinking.
Or money.
Well, he was thinking power. We get the power, then they're going to have all the money anyway.
Yeah.
But it was all about, if we get power, we can fix everything. Just give us more power. Well, he, obviously realized later on, it's not going to work. We people are the problem. And that's why the founders set up so many obstacles to government being able to take control of this with this kind of power. I love Justice Scalia and had a chance to eat meals with him and just talk. And he told a lot of jokes and stories like I did. But I had a group coming to D.C. from my hometown, senior citizens. And I said, well, is there something I can do for you when you come to D.C.? And they said, yeah, you know Scalia. We'd all love to meet Justice Scalia. So Justice Scalia was gracious. He set up a meeting room in the Supreme Court. And he comes walking in. Here's all these senior citizens. And he said, well, Louis said you wanted to meet me. Here I am. What questions have you got? And he so intimidated him. He said, come on, come on. You want to meet me? You must have questions. What are your questions? And finally, one brave gentleman said, would you say that we're the most free country because we have the best Bill of Rights? And I love Scalia's brashness. He says, oh, gosh, no. He said the Soviets had a better Bill of Rights than we do. The reason that we're the most free country ever was because they did not trust government. That's the reason. So they set up as many obstacles as they could for government being able to take over our lives. That's why we're free. All those obstacles and their distrust of government. And I'm going, wow, what a brilliant man to put it so succinctly.
I hear you. And Louis, what you just said about we'll do it better really resonated with me, because there was a time in which I probably 15 years ago, I was working in a healthcare office, and I was trying to convince these people about socialism. And I had been involved with Curtis Bowers, who had 2 DVDs out, Agenda Grinding America Down and Agenda Masters of the Seat, about the attempted communist takeover of our country. And there was a young girl, she was Italian, she was 22, just had graduated from college, and she told me she was a communist. She sat and ate with me one day. And I said, it never's worked. And that is exactly what she says. I know it has never worked, but I just believe it'll work here. Scary. Very, very scary. And that point of view. So, Louis, how bad is it, before we get into what may be happening at the conventions and things? Where are we right now in America? They've been pushing this ball, boiling, frogging us for 75 years.
Yeah.
Where do we stand?
Well, we're in, as we used to say in the Army, we're in some really deep kimchi. This is a dangerous time, a dangerous place. We are on the brink of potentially losing the freest country in the world at one time. We're now not listed as the freest at all. But I think we've got one more election, and if it goes the way that officially was pronounced in 2020, I'm afraid we're done, because they've already weaponized most of the departments of the federal government, so that they're so close to their full takeover. And like we were talking about earlier, a lot of these people don't realize they're going to be, thrown to the gutter once they're no longer needed to create the takeover. But when you weaponize the DOJ and the intelligence apparatus and even the DOD, and of course, states always been pretty much been a bunch of leftists, or a lot of them, very, very few conservatives there. But yeah, it's a dangerous time. And that's why it is so important that people get out and participate, not just vote. You got to do that, but get out and be a poll watcher, be a precinct chair, be somebody that's going to work at the voting stations, somebody that's going to observe, somebody ready to report. And then we've got to have people ready to move. And it's probably going to have to be local folks, since so many of most of the big blue cities, they're Democrat controlled, and they don't want anybody having accountability at the election site. So it may be Republican counties are going to have to send people to the big cities to volunteer and to help watch and to help report things that are inappropriate. And so it's I think the most important election. We've heard that a few election cycles, and actually I think the last couple were, but this I think is our last chance.
I hear you, Louie, and I want you to address that, because one of the problems I think we have is we've cried wolf a couple times, and we really thought it was the wolf. Like, I remember a lot of people thought Bill Clinton was the Antichrist and we wouldn't survive him a second time. Me personally, I was stunned when America voted for Barack Obama a second time. I did not think we would survive that. So now we're telling people, look, if you don't vote for Donald Trump, right now we're looking at Constitution versus communism. That's where it's going to end up. Because everything keeps moving. If they get their way, that's where we're going to end up.
Yeah.
If Trump gets in there, we're moving back towards a Constitution, America first. And that's the way I see the election. And I say we've got to do it now. But how do we address this to people who would say, yeah, you told me that when Clinton was running, and you told me that when Obama was running a second time, and we're still here?
Yeah. Well, we've never before had a Justice Department that became the biggest political weapon for the existing administration. That's never, ever happened, where it's their biggest tool for the election, to manipulate the election and to keep Donald Trump from winning. So that should tell you how much more serious this is than it's ever been. But I also, Gary, I got to throw in, it's not just the Marxist. Carlos the Jackal, perhaps the most famous international assassin, said many years ago, the way to bring down the United States will be for Marxists and radical Islamists to join forces.
Join forces.
We have that component in America as well. And it wasn't, before Comey lost all credibility, he was indicating we had cells in every major city in America. With the millions and millions that have come flooding in recent years, that they've got a lot of terrorists in here. We know they've got terrorists. We have no idea how many and exactly who they are because of this administration's unwillingness to secure our border. So you have, and that's an interesting historical dynamic as well, when Marxists and radical Islamists join forces. But you can see how the radical Islamists are willing to say or do anything to bring down America when they start helping protest for LGBTQ rights, when they know, and you and I know,
if they want to kill them,
they would kill them in the country where they came from or their country of preference. Yet they're out there pushing for that because they know it creates more moral degeneration and makes it easier to have the takeover. But when if they were to get their way and have a takeover, then you have a great dynamic. You've got the Marxists, and you can't be a true Marxist unless you're an atheist. And that Dostoevsky said back in the 1800s, taking on this idiot named Marx, that the problem with Marxism is atheism. The government has to be God. And then on the other hand, you've got radical Islamists that think if you don't believe exactly what I do, then we should kill you or make you servants. And so those two are going to then end up having to fight it out to see who gets to control this once great United States. Now, I'm saying that as if it were going to happen, but God gave us free will. And we can choose to stand up and protect this country. And by stand up, I have to throw this in, but because I hear some people saying, we're going to rise up. It can't be violent. That's what these
want.
In charge. They want some violent attack by conservatives, and so they can finish off declaring martial law. Everybody that's conservative is, a radical that has to be imprisoned. This is where it goes if we allow the left to provoke us into violence. We got to take the lead from Dr. King. That and really he showed it wasn't the blowing up the buildings and killing people, the Bill Ayers tactics. It was the peaceful protests that Dr. King talked about that really led to the civil rights.
Yeah, and the thing is, you're so right, because they're begging, they're egging us on. They're egging us on. Just start something so we can have a reason to start blasting you guys. You brought up the border. You're from Texas. Obviously, you're close. Here's what I don't understand. After 9/11, there's enough people alive that remember that. And there have been other terrorist attacks. And after we understand and have a general idea about radicalism and people that want to, blow stuff up here, why is it people are watching for the last 4 years or more, people just coming across the border in streams on all the networks because it can't be hidden. And even if you're not seeing it on the mainstream or in MSNBC and CNN, you're seeing it on the internet and you're seeing all these, and terrorists are coming across, fentanyl, child sex trafficking, MS-13, all kind of gangs. Why is it America's putting up with this, Louie? I would think the last thing we would want when we see Chinese nationals and Islamic people, the terrorists coming across the border, we say, oh, hell no. We have to close this.
Yeah. Well, it's uh, that's a very interesting dynamic. You've got the people in charge that realize they're risking, everything by just leaving the border wide open. But the useful savants, the Democrats that support these Marxists and groups like Antifa and BLM, it was never about Black Lives Matter. It was about a takeover. But again, the Democrats think, gee, this is going to be great, and they don't realize they're going to be thrown to the curb. They're thinking, gosh, if we can just get these millions of people in and give them benefits, they'll vote for Democrats like Lyndon Johnson was purportedly said back in the 60s with the civil rights,
Oh, I know it well.
yeah, they're going to vote for us for 400 years.
That's not what he said. You know what he said. I'll say it. He said those niggas will be voting for us for 200 years.
Yeah.
That was the quote, right?
Yeah, that's what I understood. I'm not sure about the number of years, but the idea was
right.
We're going to buy votes. And so they think they're going to be able to make themselves the permanent ruling political party in America. And what they don't understand, like we were talking about earlier, Gary, they're not going to be the ones in charge. They're going to be thrown to the curb, and the radical Marxists will take over, and they won't even say thank you for helping us take over.
I hear you. Louie, please explain the premise of your article about the Marxist Revolution, the Democratic Party 2024, America, and why the left is determined to destroy her. What did you want us to know in this piece? Tell people where they can find the piece, and what did you want them to know?
Well, it's at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, the front page magazine. You can click on that and find the article. But it was really inspired by conversations I've had with David over the years.
He was a former communist. He was raised by card-carrying parents right down the road from me.
Yeah. I years ago, I introduced him to somebody and said, and David was originally a socialist. And David went, Louie, I was a full-blown
communist.
My mommy was a commie. My daddy was
right in Basin down the road. Yeah.
And actually, his parents were out.
Stalinists, he said.
Yeah, but they were in the 50s. They were hiding the fact that they were communists.
And they were school teachers.
Yeah, and in the 60s, he said they got a little quieter after Khrushchev released all the information about the 20 million people that Stalin had killed. They got a little quieter, but they never learned from their communist ways that his father absolutely despised anything involving capitalism or really free enterprise. But I asked him one time, look, you guys, he and Tom Hayden and others were planning the protests and riots for the 68 Democrat convention. And I said, David, I've always wondered, you had the Democrats were nominating to that point, perhaps the most liberal person ever to be president, Hubert Humphrey. And the Republicans were nominating, a guy that led the charge in the House before he was vice president against communists. Nixon going to be nominated as a Republican. Why would you go after the Democrat convention? He said, well, it helped that Humphrey had supported Vietnam, but he said, you got to remember our slogan. Our slogan was the worse, the better. The more chaos they could create.
That one.
the better.
Ooh.
Yeah, he said that was and still is a slogan. The worse, the better. The more chaos they can create, the more opportunity for that Marxist takeover. And he said, we were a little concerned that if Humphrey got elected president, that it would be more difficult to get young people out in the streets rioting than if Nixon was elected. It'd be easier to
Mm.
get kids out in the street rioting. And, that was such a wake up. Holy cow, these people are serious. They don't care about political parties. They are really wanting a takeover.
Revolution.
Yeah. And Merrick Garland, look, I know, from the reports of his life before he was AG, he was, all about justice and fairness and whatnot. But we've seen his turn to the dark side. And I think if things go wrong in the election in November, you're going to see Merrick Garland. He either got to, like Darth Vader, finish the turn to the dark side completely, or he's got to wake up and realize what a tool he was helping those that are bringing down the country. But they use that anger and jealousy, and they breed it and grow it in somebody like Garland until he has absolute contempt for people that oppose him.
I hear you. Louie, you really opened my eyes to one thing, and I'm going to ask you that question second. But like, if the Marxists are going after the Democrats, and we know who the Marxist wing is, just start with AOC and just keep going. What do they want at this convention? What are they trying to accomplish? And here's the big question now. Could it possibly be that they would rather have Trump as president so they can riot in the streets and try and burn the country down?
Well, that's why I brought up the example of the 68 conventions. That was exactly what they wanted back then. They knew it would be easier getting people to go wild rioting with Nixon as president than it would be for Humphrey. So, yeah, I just know this. I really believe that Trump will be reelected. I don't know whether he will be declared the winner or not. But if he is declared the winner, I think we're headed for some of the worst violence we've ever seen. And by the way, we've had our U.S. military being trained to put down unrest in cities. I hear from people whose kids have been involved in the training. So they're expecting some unrest, but I think they're figuring that will be a bunch of conservatives coming out when the biggest danger to the worst violence will be Trump being announced as the winner. Then the Marxists are going to be all in. The radical Islamists are going to be all in because they're so close to taking over everything. They're so close. You can feel it sometimes. They're almost giddy that they're about to take over and be able to smash their opponents for good. And they don't realize they're going to be smashed as useful idiots that just help the Marxists or Islamists get there.
I hear you. Now, as I tell people a lot on the show, because I'm a born again Christian, a follower of Jesus, and as I tell people that that Constitution is based on Judeo-Christian values, this guy, we're made free by God.
Yeah.
Government, because if government gives you your freedom, government can take it away. And that we need to fight to keep that Constitution. And if we pray and do the right thing, and as you said, we have to get involved. I really believe God will fight the battle for us. I look at Gideon, where he took it from 30,000 to 300. That's all he needed. He just needed one shepherd boy, as little David, against Goliath and the whole Philistine army. He'll help us start the battle, and then we have to take out the trash. That's the way I see it. I hope that's the way, and I pray that's the way it's going to go down. Well, that's my point of view of it. But what I would like to find is your point of view of what you think we need to do as we the people to make sure we've done all we can to make sure that they don't take over this country on November 5th.
Well, as we talked about, people have got to get out and vote. They've got to protect the election. But the real answer, and I love Chuck Colson, and
Ah,
I mean he came to the Lord after Watergate. That
mm-hmm.
is
And
Damascus
prison, in
Road,
prison. Yeah.
and but he was saying one time we had a reception in the Capitol in the basement, and he was saying our hope will not arrive on Air Force One. Our hope is in Jesus. But
There you go.
for the
Jesus
first
Christ.
time, I'm sure you saw. I bet you've had shows talking about it, but the Gallup polling showed for the first time since the polling had occurred, which really means the first time in American history, a majority of Americans have no ties to any place of worship whatsoever.
It's
And
crazy.
that's the first time in American history. So if
Louis, shows you that's the other thing. The communists went about taking over the evangelical church. They sent their leaders in, and that's why they've twisted God's justice into the social justice
yeah.
garbage we're seeing coming out of the church.
Well, and Hitler did the same thing, and he had so many preachers that caved in and went along with it, just to go along with authority. But as John Adams said, just keep coming back to this point. Our Constitution was intended for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the governing of any other. And if we're not going to get back, Gary, to teaching there is a moral right and wrong, it's not all relative. If we're not going to get back to teaching that, then we're not going to be able to keep our Constitution. You can't let people have Second Amendment or First Amendment rights if you haven't taught them that it's wrong to kill and that it's wrong to lie, and you have to be jealous. We've got to get back to teaching those basic moral tenets, or otherwise this little experiment self-government is going to be done.
Right. We've lasted longer than any other nation. There's a
Yeah.
reason for that. Louis, I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
I love
I've
talking to
really
you.
enjoyed talking to you. Please tell people how they can reach you and anything you'd like to promote.
Well, at Rep Louie Gohmert, or email Louie, GINC@gmail.com. And I'm senior fellow with David Horowitz Freedom Center. You can reach out to them if you want me to come speak. But I'm trying to get a book finished. I am really trying. I should have had it done by now. And the premise is just how we got here. And I can lay out exactly and do how we did get here and our small chance to make it right from here. But we got to get back to our moral underpinnings, and those were Judeo-Christian, is the way it is.
I hear you, Louis, and we need to pray. But prayer, faith without works is dead.
Yeah.
You have to have both. You can't have one or without the other. You have to have faith. You must pray.
Yep.
But they're also
Yep.
we can't just sit there, people. We
Yep.
have to go out and fight. We have to show God we care.
Yeah.
We have
Well,
to get out there and
the
the Lord Jesus
talents.
he'll help us. He'll give us that. He'll give
Right.
us this. But
You don't
we
just
have
sit
to.
back with what God gave you and not
Right.
do something. But
That's how we got in this problem.
yeah, I got so tired of Christian friends in Congress saying, Louie, don't worry. We don't have to worry. God's in control. And I heard a preacher named Tommy Nelson in Denton, Texas said, yeah, just because God's in control doesn't mean he wants you to lean on your shovel and pray for a hole.
Thank you. There you go. I like that.
And yeah, he gave you tools. He gave every one of us some tools, no matter who you are. And you use the tools you've got, and we can preserve this little place where we get to self-govern.
We just got through celebrating 2 days. We got through celebrating a day where the soldiers, that put their life on the line outside of this country to help keep us free, and a flag that is a symbol of what this country is supposed to stand for. And Memorial Day, there are a lot of people that died to keep us free. We need to do our part now to make sure we stay that way.
Got that right.
Louis, I really thank you for coming on. You're always welcome to come back on the show. And thank you, and keep up the good fight. Don't let them grind you down, and please keep speaking truth to power.
Thank you so much, Gary.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on. There you have it, everybody. Louie Gohmert. I want to thank my guest, Louie Gohmert, for giving us mega doses of information about what is going on in America, about the Marxist revolution and radical Islam that is threatening we the people, our Constitution, the freedom of our nation. This nation was founded, everybody, to be about limited government, about freedom and liberty. There are many, many factions that want to take this away. So we thank you, Louie, for standing up and being a voice of truth in this matter. Keep up the good fight. And once again, as I said, don't let them grind you down. This podcast is available at radioinfluence.com or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Hope you subscribe to it, leave a rating and a review. And the video version, YouTube, Rumble, Conservative Television of America, the same thing. Hit that notification button, subscribe, leave a review. Let us know what you think. I love talking back and forth with the guests. There's also an audio archive version with more than 175 high-profile guests who have previously been on the show several times. They include like Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, Ben Carson, Naomi Wolf, Monica Crowley, Rebecca Friedrichs, Vince Everett Ellison, Carol Swain, Brandon Tatum, Carrie Lake, David Horowitz, who we talked about here. He's been on 3 times. Kevin Sorbo. The list goes on and on and on. I could keep going, but I'll stop right there. And check out the audio versions because a lot of what you will hear from the last couple of years is just as valid today. Well, that's it for now, everybody. So until the next time, this is your host, Gary Benford, saying, God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America. And boy, do we really need God to bless America.